And I got two special. They're going to be speaking at the TEDx event here in San Luis Obispo, April 14th. Please be there. They're awesome. They're amazing. They're my youngins on the group out of the speaking list, but young doesn't mean less knowledgeable or less experienced. Both of them bring a lot to the table. And a plus is their couple. So I have Henry and Victoria, well, soon to be Victoria Edelman. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us, Prince.
Yeah.
So just to start off, speaking about yourself, and Victoria, I'll start with you.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, how you got here, where you're thinking about going here in the future.
Yeah, super good question. So whenever I get asked this question, I always kind of go back to like what got me into sports psychology, because I think that's a story that most people want to know when they ask like, why do you do what you do? And I think it all kind of goes back to my experiences as a collegiate athlete. So I was a softball player in college. That's actually where I met Henry. We met each other at Willamette in college. We were both athletes there. And I've been an athlete my whole life. That was a huge part of my identity for my whole life. And I got to college, and it's super interesting. You kind of get sold like this dream as a high school athlete of what college athletics looks like. And then I got to college, and it wasn't quite everything that I had dreamed it was going to be as a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl. You get there, and the coaching maybe isn't as conducive to optimal performance as it should be. And like the weightlifting maybe isn't as conducive to optimal performance as it should be. We didn't have a strength and conditioning coach. It was our coach giving us our workouts every off season. And so I don't know, you kind of like are going through a really big transition of you're not with your family anymore, right? Like that's your first time kind of out on your own. Yeah, your first time out on your own, a little bit of freedom. And so you're trying to navigate that transition. And then you add on top of that, this transition of, at least for me, like college athletics is not what I thought it was. And we just had a coach that wasn't super great at coaching, wasn't super great at creating like a cohesive team environment. And then I also really struggled with things like confidence and self-doubt and negative self-talk and all of these things that are really not conducive to optimal performance. I'm like struggling with these things in all of these different areas, and just not feeling like there's a ton of resources to talk about these things. Like when it comes to sport, you don't talk to your coach about those things, right? Because they're making the decision about whether you play on Saturday or not. And so if you go to them and say, hey, I'm struggling with XYZ, like I'm not feeling really confident in myself, well, they're not going to start you on Saturday, because now they know that you're not feeling super confident in your performance. And so you don't really have that person to go talk to. You have your teammates, but again, there's kind of that like wall that you're trying to build a little bit of like, I don't want to seem weak to my teammates, right? I don't want to seem like I'm struggling to my teammates. You don't really talk to them about those things. And so it just felt like resource-wise, there wasn't a ton out there. And so I started to kind of do some research of like, okay, what can I do with that? Like, I don't feel like I have resources. How can I try and change that? And I was getting my undergrad in psychology at the time. I think the human mind is so fascinating. But I also knew that clinical psychology was not really something that I wanted to pursue. And at the time, it felt like my only option. Like you get your degree in psychology and then you pursue clinical psychology. That seems like the natural progression. And this sounds like kind of a cliche, isn't the word, but it kind of sounds like a cliche story. I literally typed in sport and psychology into the Google search bar. I'm like, I wonder if there's anything out there that could help me bridge these two things that are super fascinating. And sports psychology popped up as one of the first things. And it was the first time I ever heard about sports psychology, was never exposed to it in college, was never even exposed to really like strategies or techniques that would even remotely fall under sports psychology in college. So I decided to pursue that, got my master's in sports psychology, Got to do a ton of applied experiences. So I got to work with incarcerated youth, which was really, really fascinating. So looking at how can we take these sports psychology techniques and implement them into real life situations, and implement them into a population that's not sport. Because the thing about sports psych skills is in a lot of way they're life skills.
Right.
And so how can we kind of transfer those things? I got to work with a high school women's basketball team, a volleyball team, and then from there, I decided I love being a student. I always joke that if I could be a professional student for the rest of my life, I would just be a professional student for the rest of my life. So I decided to get my PhD. So I went to the University of Tennessee to get my PhD in their sports psychology and motor behavior program, and got to do some applied work there as well. So I got to work with a football team while I was there, and that was really cool. That was my first experience with a men's team. So all of my experiences up to that point had predominantly been with women's teams. And so my first experience with not only a big team, like when we're talking about football, there's a lot of people involved in football, but also kind of my first experience in a really male dominated space. So I was the only woman in that space pretty consistently. And so that was a really cool experience. Wrote my dissertation on emotional abuse in sport. So really kind of trying to look at like, why do we accept some behaviors in sport that we would never accept in any other context?
Right.
And what does that kind of dynamic look like?
Yeah.
And now I'm teaching at Cal Poly. So I get to teach kind of hopefully future aspiring practitioners about sports psychology, which is a super fulfilling thing to be able to do.
Wow, Victoria, that is a lot.
I
Just like
can talk a lot. I'm sorry.
no, that's great. I mean, here, I've known you now for a few months, and I've spoken in your class, your sports psychology class. Myself, I have a little bit of a background in sports psychology, and just hearing how you came to this path for yourself is super interesting, and all of the things that you've done up until this point. It's amazing, and even you speaking about your own struggles being an athlete and coming to the conclusion that athletes do have these issues. And so, and a lot of times, like you said, they can't confide in anybody. They can't confide in their teammates, and they can't confide into the coach. So where do you go with these emotions that you're dealing with? And parents may or may not understand, especially if they don't have an athletic background themselves, or aren't at or haven't competed at the level that you're competing. So a lot of times, yeah, it is a struggle. And I think we all have very similar backgrounds. I played college football. I know Coach Adelman played college football, and I think that it is the consensus across the board for a lot of young athletes. Now, Coach Henry, your turn, man. Tell us where you from. What brought you here?
Well, so, I mean, like Victoria said, going to Willamette University for our undergraduate, I never thought that I would meet my future wife there,
Oh.
No, it's interesting, man, because, you get done with high school, and like she said, there's, you still want to play the sport. You still want to be a part of it. There was a lot of opportunities to do Division I schools and preferred walk-on opportunities. And, for me, it was about actually getting on the field and playing. That's the fun part. Right. And so I was looking at these Division III schools as an opportunity this is a location and an institution that I can go there, get a great academic aspect of it, and then be able to go in and make an immediate impact within the football program. And so to me, it wasn't about the name brand. I could have done that, right? I could have done that. But, a lot of it to me was just I want to go somewhere with coaches that I see eye to eye with. I had a really good visit with as far as the hosts and the team that I was with. I really enjoyed my teammates during my time there, and still have a lot of special relationships and friendships with those guys. And, going there, I knew that I could get on the field right away. And, that's ended up being that way. I played all 4 years and traveled all 4 years. And, all that being said, the idea of being a strength conditioning coach kind of arose really in my high school years. We had a strength conditioning coach at Arroyo Grande High School. So currently we're in San Luis Obispo, California. I went to Arroyo Grande High School, which is in Arroyo Grande, California, right down south, about 20 minutes. And it was really important within our program, and it was a huge priority within our program that we lifted weights. And we had a very, very good weightlifting program. And the way that our strength conditioning coach impacted our group, the type of guy he was, but also what he was able to get out of us and draw out of us, as well as the football coaching staff. I knew going into college just by the guys that were getting recruited next to me, right? You always have a goal, and I'm sure Victoria had this goal. Prince, I'm sure you had this goal at one point. We all thought growing up that we could be a pro athlete.
Absolutely.
Right? We all thought that. And so you get to a certain point, though, for me especially, when I got these best friends that are Division I guys, 30 plus offers, you have none, like no real full scholarship offers. You go, yeah, the NFL is probably not going to happen, right? And so you start looking like, what is that next step? And so for me, just taking the example that was set from my high school strength conditioning coach, the high school football coach that I had, going into the collegiate setting, having a really strong exercise science program at Willamette University. That was one of the biggest things that my twin brother and I, kind of looked at when deciding to make that commitment, was the strength of their exercise science department. And how well put together it was, the labs that they had, the facilities that they had for the laboratories that you could be a part of. And so it was kind of a no-brainer in a sense. But then it was when I got there that it really solidified for me that strength conditioning and working with athletes, either collegiately or professionally, could be a very viable option, and it could be a super fun, fulfilling option. And so right from the get-go, I was doing internships in college. I was coaching. I've been coaching since the age of 19.
Wow.
So I really, when people ask, sometimes you don't know what to say, like, how long have you been coaching? It's like, well, kind of like 11 years. But, that almost seems silly because I'm only 30. And it's like, well, how have you been coaching 11 years? Like, how and so I've been coaching collegiate athletes really for about 7 to 8 years. But I started my coaching career midway through college, and I'm really appreciative and fortunate that I started young. I feel like I was able to find my confidence and my voice. And, I'd always been kind of a natural leader. That was always kind of where I was comfortable. And that's what I was appointed to when I was working and playing sports growing up. But then to have that, I guess, personality, that instinctiveness, and then take that into the weight room setting and not only help athletes professionally, collegiate, high school, but then to work with little kids, be able to work with, octogenarians. That's where I really built my confidence. And if you could coach that elderly woman, or you could coach that kid that can't sit still, these college kids are easy. So I knew that I just wanted to get to this point. And so I did that all through college. I went to North Dakota at a junior college out there. Shout out Botno, North Dakota. That was my very first coaching job. And that's taken me all over the country, right? So I went to North Dakota. I went back to Fresno State, and I was a strength conditioning coach at Fresno State. I worked as a graduate assistant, was able to earn the right to get my master's degree completely paid for while being a coach there. A complete blessing and an opportunity that I'd really been working towards up to that point. And then from there, when Victoria was getting her chance to go do her PhD at the University of Tennessee, the pandemic hit. And I actually got let go from Fresno at the time. I had just gotten promoted to part-time status. I'd been coaching my own teams there. I'd built a lot of really good, strong relationships with the different coaches and teams that I'd been working with. There was a turnover with the coaching staff at the time. And that had nothing to do with it, really, though. The pandemic hit, and they were letting sports go. They were letting part-time staff go. They were letting all the GAs and interns go. They just couldn't afford much, and we didn't know how long it was going to be, right? I mean, we were told initially 3 weeks or something crazy, and look how long that actually ended up lasting for, that we were, sequestered and in-house. on lockdown. And so when Victoria and I moved to the South, I just kind of did it on a whim. I knew that I didn't want to do long distance, which we had kind of done a few times up to that point, just moving back and forth and kind of just chasing our professional pathways. And, it was one of those things where I followed her there. And, it was really in Tennessee where I started to believe that everything happens for a reason, because, and the other thing that I really believe based off that experience is that good things happen to people that work hard with a positive attitude and a positive outlook. I felt like our just continuing to stay positive, continuing to kind of hype each other up professionally, it really allowed us to have and instill a great amount of confidence and a great amount of comfortability in kind of where we were going. And we both knew that we could do those things together. And it's worked out since, right? Because when we were in Tennessee, she was finishing up. I got the call to come back to San Luis Obispo. I call this home in a lot of ways. My family lives right down the road still. And she was able to come here and get a job right away too, and some people might call that luck, right? The old adage that luck is just when preparation meets opportunity. Shoot, we were prepared. The opportunity was there. Call it lucky if you want to. I just think we're just hard working and we just ended up in the right spot. But, through all that experience, now I'm working here at Cal Poly. I work with a few different teams here as a strength conditioning coach, football, men's soccer, women's basketball, who's on a roll right now. I got to shout them out. Had another good dub last night for them. Swim and dive is one of the programs I work with. And then our wrestling program, who's about to start their conference matches here in a bit too, in the next weeks. And so, like Victoria was saying, like just a very fulfilling experience. I'm really blessed to have someone like her to be able to kind of do this journey alongside of. We wake each other up, and you know how it is, man. There's some mornings where you're like, damn, I don't want to get up today.
Yes, I do.
And you kind of nudge them out and you say, hey, baby, you're going to be good. You're going to be good. Like, go be great. Have a good day. Like, and it's little things like that in the morning that, get you up and just make you feel blessed and fortunate. So, that's kind of how I got here. And I'm just really happy to have her alongside with me to really make that process that much easier, from an emotional and a mental standpoint for sure. I'm getting kind of emotional talking about it for real, but
yeah, man, I could tell. No, both you guys, I'm so blessed and honored to have you guys in my life. And I knew I met Henry first, but then I met Victoria because you guys were still separate when you first came here.
Mhm.
But you guys are, first of all, super cute, almost disgustingly so. And you can tell the chemistry between you two, and just being able to feed off each other. And you guys give me energy just even watching how you guys are moving, and just being a young couple and having that emotional intelligence and security, and being able to be high level professionals. This is not an easy profession on
Right.
either side of the equation, so for you guys to be able to function at that level, really speaks to where you guys are and the training that you guys have. So I just wanted to shout you guys out for that. And that's part of the reason why I wanted you guys to speak on the TEDx, because I think what needs to happen is people need to hear, especially from young professionals, not us old people, but they need to hear from the younger professionals as well, as and that, hey, you guys can do this. This is not beyond what you guys are capable of doing.
Yeah.
Now,
I know a lot of people, Prince, that it's hard to kind of interact and mix the two, and it's easy when it's with your best friend. You know what I'm saying? It's
right. Alignment is I don't think it's luck. I think at best it's alignment.
Right.
Everything does happen for a reason, and I think just like you guys came together in college, and you guys are still together here at the university, here at Cal Poly. Just you guys even flowing into the positions that you guys are in now. That's just alignment. And look at where we're going now together. So,
dude, well said.
I know, man. Hey, I'm getting emotional. I'm getting goosebumps over here. Hey, Victoria, I want to circle back to you.
Yes.
And you spoke a little bit about that you're working in sports psychology. You're a professor. You've done your PhD, and so now, what are the things that you're working on in the department?
Yeah, good question. I think the focus right now is just kind of trying to get my feet underneath me. You know, whenever you start something new, it's a transition period, and so coming to Cal Poly and being an instructor of record for the very first time, where you are totally in the driver's seat when it comes to the things that you're teaching, the content that you're teaching, the assignments that you're assigning. So for me, it's been an adjustment. It's been a learning period. I've made mistakes, and I'm kind of like learning from those and trying to adapt things as I move into this. It's also been a transition because Cal Poly is a quarter system, and I have almost always been on a semester system. And they don't seem that different, but they are incredibly different. Like you're talking about 16 weeks versus 10 weeks. And trying to get all that information in 10 weeks it can kind of be a lot. So that was also an adjustment at first. So I think right now it's really just been about transitioning into that role, and also gaining some confidence in that role. I think being a little bit younger, and I think this happens to everyone. I don't even think it's just age. So I'm going to take that back a little bit. I think this happens to everybody. You know, whenever you start a new role, there's kind of a little bit of that imposter syndrome, right? Like, do I belong here? Do I have the knowledge to be here? Do I have the experience to be here? And so I think it's been navigating that a little bit as well, and gaining confidence, and like, you've done the work, you have the knowledge, you do belong here, and like work with that. And so it's been a little bit of that like self-discovery and self-reflection and self-navigation. And you know, I try to do what I preach to my students, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do, is like, hey, I might not have the confidence right now, but like, what can I do to help remind myself that like I belong here and this is good, and I'll figure things out. So that's been right now. So I've kind of taken a hiatus a little bit from consulting with athletes, just to kind of like get my feet underneath me a little bit with teaching. I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable in where I'm at, a lot more comfortable in being up in front of students and sharing this information. And I think a part of that came with like a perspective shift. For me, it's less about like, I'm the knowledge holder and you're the knowledge receiver. And it's turned into more like, how can we learn this information together? And you bring just as much knowledge into the classroom that I bring into the classroom. That knowledge might look different, but we're bringing equal amounts of knowledge into this room. And so how do we kind of like co-construct that knowledge together? And I think that shift has really helped me in terms of it being like more conversational, and how do we figure all these things out together? And I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. Let's kind of try and navigate those answers together. So yeah, it's just been gaining confidence, gaining comfortability in the role that I'm in. I'm continuing to strive for learning the best that I can. I think we're never done learning. I think there's always things that we could be looking to learn as professionals. And so and then eventually I'm hoping to shift back into that consulting role a little bit, because that's really where I got passion in this field, is like seeing athletes and doing that work with athletes and helping them understand like stress in relation to their performance, and helping them understand determination and motivation, right, in relation to their performance, and different things like that. So you know, it'll probably be a little bit, just because we're also wedding planning, and so like couple that on top of class prep and all of that. So just kind of trying to like take things in strides, and just work hard, and like Henry said, when the opportunities come, just always kind of be willing to jump at those opportunities. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's just navigating and figuring things out, and going with the flow the best that I can.
Right. You said determination. You got Prince all fired up. That's what
Keywords, man. Keywords, man. Hey, well, Coach Henry, you're on the performance side
Yeah,
of things for the most part, and not that these skills don't cross over and into both worlds, but we operate on the performance side. And Victoria, you operate really on the kind of the mental aspect of things, managing stress and uh, managing your mindset and things of that
Mhm.
yeah.
nature. And so together, when you guys get together, do you guys talk about this stuff? Do you guys bounce ideas off each other, how to help each other or help each other's part of the profession, like each other's teams and things of that nature?
For sure.
Classroom.
I've learned a lot from Victoria, and I think the biggest thing to take away as a strength coach, sport performance coach, um, you can give an athlete all the physical tools. You could have the best programming in the world. At the end of the day, they got to have the belief and the confidence to go execute those tools and what you've allowed them to have available to them, right? And so, in that sense, there's definitely been times where an athlete will come to me with something, um, and I'll never reveal personal information or anything like that, but I will say, hey, there was a situation at work today that I was not as well equipped to handle as you might have been. How would you go about that? Right. And so, I think the other thing too is in just being around her, it's not even necessarily bringing things up like at the dinner table, like, well, this happened at work today, right? It's more so just organically over the time that we've been together. You hear things, you take tidbits. I think the biggest thing from a sports psych standpoint that I implement with myself, that I implement, that I try and really tell our athletes to implement is self-talk and positive self-talk. And I think that's an absolute game changer where, Prince, when it comes to weightlifting, you understand this. Like sometimes you approach the bar and you go, ugh, I don't know about this one.
Right, exactly. No.
And then you like I did it last night. We were doing a max back squat and I approached the bar and I immediately felt like, what if I fail? And I
Yeah.
said, hold up. I literally out loud, I was like, hold up. No. I took a step back and I was, and the guys I was lifting with were like, Coach, what are you doing? And I'm like, I was just had negative shit in my head right now. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, and then you just tell yourself, I'm like that. I'm great. Like, I've been working, I'm a badass. Let's go do this. And I think that makes all the difference a lot of the time, man. If you can just kind of tell yourself, but you can't lie to yourself, right? Like, you
No.
know yourself the best. And that's what I really like about my job is you put athletes in stressful, adverse situations, and really in order to see their true colors, and really in order for them to find out who they are, right? And they'll find out. They'll find out if they're really about it, right? And a lot of the time, if they have had those experiences of success, you can lean on those experiences, have that positive self-talk, be able to bring those things to light in those new adverse situations, and then go ahead and get the job accomplished. Again, same situation. This is actually funny. Last night, there was an athlete that I was working with who failed his back squat max twice. And I said, hey, bro, don't you think all the injuries that you've come back from are harder to deal with than you not getting this squat right now? And I think it just put it in perspective for him. You know what I mean? Like, he's dealt with tougher, harder things. Don't make this a big deal, because it's not.
Right.
Like, let's put things in perspective. And I think at the same time, as a coach, as as a practitioner, it's one of those things. I think we're there a lot of the time to be able to put perspective and wisdom into our young clients, young athletes' minds a little bit. I think sometimes, whether it's inexperience, in the world or in their sport, I think sometimes they have a hard time kind of being able to put those thoughts into eloquent silos to make themselves say, like, hey, you've actually done way harder than this before. Don't fret or don't stress about this thing. This is going to be easy compared to what you've already accomplished. I think
Right.
sometimes, I stress living in the present, but I think you got to rely on past experiences and past successes in order to be able to, have accomplishments in the present or in the future, right? Like, I'm a big live in the present guy. I don't think you should worry too much about the past or worry too much about the future, but it is important to be able to hold on to those things in a certain extent, in a certain sense, so that you can go and pull those things and draw that
That's
experience
a
out
reference.
again. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, yes, we do talk about those things, and I try and manage all those organic lessons that I've been taught from Victoria, and pass them on to my athletes as well. And I think some of that is just inherent too. It's innate sometimes, when you're talking to an athlete, and it just makes sense that if you have negative thoughts, you will be less likely to accomplish a task, right? If you have doubt, you are less likely to accomplish something. And I think that's a beautiful thing about psychology as a paradigm too, is, it's one of those things. It's very qualitative, right? But it all
Right.
makes perfect sense. I think there's a lot of very, very reasonable things that come out of that field that, you pass along to your athletes. And that's why, obviously, I think our athletes here at Cal Poly, and our athletes really everywhere else that I've worked, really could utilize and benefit from having someone like Victoria at their disposal to be able to use those tools and draw from those things within the state of competition to be able to enhance their performance.
Both of you guys have spoke on what I call self-esteem, aspects of self-esteem, where and there's two parts to the esteem: yourself, obviously, your self-concept, and then having what I call self-efficacy.
Yeah.
And self-concept would be your ability to how you see yourself, and the self-efficacy, it would be the ability to kind of realize that, yes, I'm having a reference, being able to pull from that reference that I can handle whatever situation is in front of me.
Yeah.
And together, those combined creates this aura about yourself, your self-esteem, and that's what you bring to a situation. And you talked about, walking up to a bar. Trust me, the bar never lies.
That's why I love my job, man. There is truths being told every single day, and
Absolutely.
that's why it's beautiful, and that's why it's also a curse sometimes. And that's why people don't like getting up at 6 a.m. because sometimes when it's that early in the morning, you don't want to hear the truth.
Right.
It is what it is.
And that bar will talk to you.
Yeah.
You're not the only one that's had those second thoughts, man. I competed powerlifting,
Yeah.
and you approach that bar, and if there's any amount of self-doubt, let me tell you, the bar will conquer you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel good to be conquered by some object that's not alive.
An inanimate object.
Yeah, exactly.
But on the flip side of that, Prince, when you do conquer that, obviously the losses are painful, but when you do conquer that, it's got to be one of the best feelings, and that's why it's addicting. That's why I love being in the space that I work in. Is you see those failures, and you see those failures lead to successes, and then you see how the people you work with react within those moments of success. And I mean, it's got to be one of the most fulfilling and fun things ever to do it daily, regardless of getting up early in the morning or whatever like that. It is so damn worth it, man. It is so damn worth it.
I think too, like a lot of it, what you were saying, like a lot of it comes down to like reframing how you view failure. So I love that you said, like, when you do fail, that often leads to success. Like, very seldom do we achieve something without failing at that thing first. And I think for me personally, and for a lot of the athletes I've worked with, it's about reframing, like, what does failure mean? Because to a lot of us, failure is the worst thing that could happen, right? Like, failure is the end all be all. It's embarrassing. It's something to be ashamed of. And that's kind of what we've been conditioned to believe about failure, is that we should fear failure. And a lot of what I do is like reframing failure as an opportunity. Like, failure gives us an opportunity to learn about ourselves. Failure gives us an opportunity to overcome adversity. failure gives us an opportunity to grow. And so like reframing how we view, like, what does it mean to fail? And it's not a bad thing to fail. In a lot of ways, like, I invite failure because that means I'm going to learn something about myself. Like, I might not be
That's right.
perfect at
No.
it, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But at least I'm going to learn something about myself in that failure. And so I just love that you said that, like, failure often leads to success, because yeah, very seldom do we achieve something and we didn't fail at it a few times first, right?
Well, and then in the weight room too, baby, like, you know, you talk about how you respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like adversity is one of those things that you're guaranteed in life, right? They say like death and taxes are the two things that you're guaranteed. Well, adversity is number three, right? And so when you talk about adverse situations, I think it's another very fulfilling aspect of what I do is to be able to kind of work with people on how they respond to failure and how they respond to adversity in
Mm-hmm.
order to then mitigate the likelihood of more failure happening, right? And so a lot of the time it's just helping someone up and saying, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps
Yeah,
and keep
absolutely.
chipping away at this thing. Because if you give up now, it's like a skill, right? If you give up now, it's going to become easier to give up
Becomes a
on
habit.
whatever it is that you got else going on, right? But if you push through this thing, right, then you could find yourself being able to push through other forms of adversity in your life and later in your life. And so that's just another huge aspect to what we do, really all three of us, is teaching that life skill of response, understanding that there will always be something adverse in your way, something negative that you need to be able to handle and push through, and then taking that, with their families, their relationships, their jobs. And I think we are really setting up the future generations to, I feel like there's a lot of pessimism and negativity, and I think sometimes it's bullshit, man. Like, it's cool to be negative. It's cool. Like, some people are too cool, like teaching them
Mhm.
like, hey, that shit's not cool. Like, you want to be positive. You want to influence somebody in the correct way. You want to make someone's day. Like, you want to push someone to be the best version of themselves. And growth means discomfort. And it's like, yeah, it's uncomfortable right now, but would you rather live with the pain of discipline and do that
Mm,
shit now and make it hard? Or would you rather live with the pain of regret that you should have just done that shit when it was hard then to make it easier on yourself now, or at least a perceived ease on yourself now, right? And so, I just think that's why I love working with you, Prince. Like, that's Coach Prince. Even though you're in the athletic training room and you're not like in the dudes in the weight room, barking at them like I am every single day, you do have that impact and that influence on these kids. And Victoria, as a teacher, as a professor, you don't see the same type of physical adversity. You don't see the same type of like energy, but you are helping these young people to understand, like, hey, life ain't fair. This is tough. I'm providing you a stimulus and a stressor, and now you need to be able to overcome this, right? Whether it's schoolwork, an assignment, a test,
right.
these kids, obviously they're learning something that you're putting in front of them, but at the same time, there's a life skill to be gained from that, because these kids are now having to overcome something and put in the time and the effort to do something that they otherwise might not want to do. You know, you get a lot of students, it's a major course. A lot of students are probably passionate about that topic, right? But at the same time, we all know we're all passionate about our field. There has been days and mornings that you don't feel like being there, but being an adult and being a high functioning performer means that you got to still go out and put your best foot forward, even on the days that you don't feel like it. And one thing that my pops used to tell me is that it's the days you don't feel like doing something and you go out and you do it to the best of your ability that you really get the most out of it. I think those are the days you gain the most growth. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just one of those things. That's why I like surrounding myself with people that are like-minded. And I think that's why you and I go so well together. Prince, I think that's why you and I see eye to eye on a lot of different things. So I'm excited for this TEDx talk and the opportunity, because I feel like there's going to be whatever it is, like 7 to 8 other like-minded people to us that are,
Yeah.
wanting to impact people's lives in that way, and show them you are capable of more, you are capable of greatness. You just need to have the tools to be able to pull that out of you, right?
And as you can see, I have two phenomenal speakers right now, and Henry can talk, but he be dropping jewels, man. He be dropping nuggets over here. Um, Henry, you're absolutely right, man. We are the influence that these kids, I call them kids, but they're young adults that these young adults really, really need. And
They're some of them act pretty childish.
yeah, and they are very childish at times, yes. But somebody has to keep the status quo. Somebody has to be the person that they're looking up to, mentorship, as leaders. Victoria, as you said in your classroom, sometimes you have to make the switch from pedagogy to andragogy, which is adult learning, because they are young adults. They're not kids anymore. So yes, they are bringing a level of experience and information to the classroom, and sometimes as the adults, we don't want to hear, because we think that we're the subject matter expert, when they have some valuable information that can help us teach them better. And how can you learn somebody if you're not willing to understand where they're coming from? And you're absolutely right. Sometimes where we need to step in is not necessarily so much as this is what you have to do, is teaching them how to gain skills in order to reframe their mind, or structure their mindset in a way that is going to be more conducive to being more positive, being a little more productive. And if we can't do that because there's a blockage there, because we're the authority and not necessarily the person that they need to gather leadership from, or leadership skills, then we're not doing a service to them. So
No, exactly. I mean,
go ahead.
you want to be the coach, or you want to be the teacher that you wanted as a young person too, right? A lot of
Right.
the time, like, talk about those things and how you interact with, your students or your athletes within those settings that you're being the leader and the authority of. You know, you need to hold that control, but at the same time, like, you need to be that person that you looked up to and that you wanted to be, in order to really draw whatever kind of impact you are trying to create within that setting, right? So, I think that's something that you could agree to too, Victoria. I mean,
Yeah, and I think really at like the root of what we're all talking about, it's been like on my mind as you're both talking, is like this notion of kind of twofold, like this notion of relationship building and understanding that a person is a holistic human being. And I know that all of us, like, that relationship building piece is really important. It could be so easy for me to show up in the classroom and just be like, student A, B, C, D, E, right? Prince, it could be really easy for you to be like, football player A, B, C, D, E, right? And
Hmm.
you'd still be able to do your job. Like, you'd
yeah,
still be able to do the job that on paper you're supposed to be doing. But I think there's a level of relationship building that's so important in everything that all three of us do. Because that relationship is going to set that foundation for trust. That relationship is going to set that foundation for them to want to come to you for that advice about things, for that advice of how to overcome adversity. That relationship is going to be the foundation for them to feel like you support them through those things. Because I think that's another huge facet, is like, do we feel supported in our pursuit of whatever it may be? Do we feel supported when we experience those failures? And I kind of lost my train of thought on the twofold: relationship building, holistic human beings.
Right.
And I also think it's really important to recognize that, like, the people that we're working with aren't just students. They aren't just athletes. They aren't just a singular thing. And I know that's something, again, that we all really pride ourselves on, is like, how do I understand you as the entire person that's showing up in this space, so that I can better support you, so that I can better work with you. And I just feel like that's really been at the heart of everything that we're talking about, is like, I don't know, to me, none of the things that we've talked about can happen unless that relationship is there and unless that understanding that they're a holistic human being is there.
And so, Victoria, keeping in line with what you're saying right now, how would you suggest, as leaders, as growing leaders, that we go about building those relationships, especially in an environment like this where the little bit of time that we do have, the limited time that we do have, it is based off performance-based measures, not necessarily, taking the time to, hey, how's your day? It's like, hey, let's get to work. How do we build those relationships in that limited amount of time that we have?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky question, right? Because at the end of the day, the golden answer would be like, well, I wish we just had more time, right? Like, at the end of the
Right.
day, like, it should be about the well-being of the people that we're working with. But we also know that we're working within like a larger structure and a larger business, and there are production outcomes and different things that we have to achieve. So I think like in a perfect world, the answer would be, well, that well-being should always come first, right? Because like that is the person that we're serving. But that's unfortunately not the reality in a lot of cases. But I think it's not even necessarily that small talk. Like, yeah, small talk helps to build a relationship. But I think for me, it's really about like being there in moments where they seek out that help, that guidance. So in moments where they ask you like, hey, Prince, like I'm really struggling with this. Can I talk to you for a minute? Or like, hey, Henry, I'm really dealing with X, Y, and Z. Can I just chat with you about it for a minute? Like being open to those moments and open to those conversations. Because again, I think it could be really easy to look at them and be like, hey, I just don't have the time right now. Like, can you email it to me, or can you text it to me, or can you or it's really easy to say like, hey, that's not really a part of my job description, right? Like my job description is to help you physically get better. My job description is to help you get stronger. It's not necessarily to help you figure out like time management, lack of confidence, different things like that. And so I think, I don't know, it's just like being open and available when they're ready to have those conversations and willing to have those conversations. Because I think in a lot of ways, you guys do build trust just through your normal conversations with athletes, through those everyday conversations with athletes. And that's what leads them to feel comfortable to come ask you like, hey, this is happening. Can I just like chat your brain for a little bit, or pull for your brain for a little bit? And it's just those little moments where we say yes and we invite them in. That means so much. And it seems like such a small thing to us, like, right? Like saying like, hey, I'm just too busy, I don't have time. Seems like such a small thing to us. But to them, that can feel like a roadblock to that like trust being gained, and a roadblock to that conversation opening. And so I wish I had like an answer, like do this.
No. That's all good stuff. That's
fine,
actually what I was poking and prodding, because I wanted to get to that, because even in my own situation, I'm not an easy egg to crack. And everybody that kind of comes to the training room, they know initially I may not give you the right response. I may not give you the response that you're looking for, and I'm not doing that to necessarily be mean. I'm doing that to try to get you to realize that I'm here. This is what the job entails, but also to get them to expand and to grow out of their comfort zone. And so when they come to the university, a lot of times they are very sheltered, very isolated. They don't know how to talk to adults. They don't know how to talk to, coaches. They don't know how to ask for things. And so, with all of that comes skill building. So I really, I encourage them in my way, to know, no, there's a way to do things and there's a way not to do things. And the beautiful thing about my approach, and I've honed this in over the years, I've been doing this a long time. Typically, because I'm a big teddy bear, and I don't want anybody to know I'm a big teddy bear at first. So, but typically, they come in as freshmen, and they're like, man, I don't want to talk to that guy. by the time that they leave in their senior year, they'll sit there if I let them, they'll sit there for hours on end in my office and talk my ear off. And I'm like, hey guys, I got a job to do. So at some point they do get it, but that's why I kind of approach it that way. That's why I actually poking and prodding. I was trying to get you to say certain keywords. Coach, you're back.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm in an office right now and somebody had just walked in, so I kind of had to just like explain to them what I was doing. But
oh, gotcha. Yeah, no worries.
So I mean, going off, Victoria, what you were saying, like, I think sometimes people talk about first impressions, right? Like when you go into a classroom and it's syllabus day or syllabus week and you have your first couple sessions with them, I think like obviously laying out clear expectations and guidelines for how this situation is going to be ran is important, right? Just kind of explain to them like what your kind of mission statement is, being able to say like, hey, I am here to support you and help you, but it is within these standards, within these restrictions, within these confines, right? And I think that's how you kind of get to be able to have the relational part with them and be able to support them in whatever it is that they need, but then also be able to say like, hey, this is kind of more the professional side of it, right? Just laying out those clear guidelines, just like with every other sport too. We have our team meetings at the beginning of each quarter, and you kind of lay out exactly the generally and for the most part the guidelines and the ground rules for what the standard and expectations are, and that way, and they can even sign a contract a lot of the time too, and that's what I had a lot of my athletes do, and that way you can be held accountable to those things if you're not upholding the standards that you've kind of agreed to and that you've signed up for. So when it comes to having restricted time, but still wanting to gain the most from those people while still having the best relationship, it's the hardest thing to do. But as long as you're super transparent and have very clear-cut standards on exactly what it is it should look like from both parties, then I think a lot of the time it ends up actually being pretty painless.
Yeah, it's been really interesting too, like from a teaching perspective. Like I have a little bit more time to get to know my students. I still have limited time, right? Because we only meet for 2 hours twice a week, and that's kind of the time that I have with them.
Right.
But I've really noticed that it is those small things. Like I make it a point to know the name of every single person in every single class that I have, and oftentimes I get comments of like, hey, you're one of the only professors that knows my name, that like knows that I'm a student in their class. Which to me, one, is really astounding. Like that's to me the basis of relationship building, right? Like refer to you by your first name and create that connection. Yeah. But then another thing, because I know I have such limited time with them, is the very first day of class, I have them fill out a document that's like, what are things I should know about you that you feel like are important in this class? What are ways that I can best support you as an instructor in this class? And so it's doing those small things that say like, hey, I'm invested in your learning just as much as you're invested in your learning. And so how can we like get there together, right? And I think that's kind of like what that contract that Henry was talking about gets to a little bit. Like I'm invested in your success just as much as you're invested in your success. How can we get there together to do that?
Yeah.
Man, I love all of you guys' ideas. That's why I had you on. Get to know you guys on a different level. So we're going to switch gears. Let's talk about the TEDx that we're having here in just a little over a month. So don't give away your whole speech, but I do want to talk about some of the concepts and ideas that you guys are going to be exploring while you guys are up on stage.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I think the best, like when you get this opportunity, right? It's just like any other sport or anything else you do. You kind of study it, you watch tape, so I've been watching different TED Talks, and I think the best ones are the ones that tell a story. So I'm not going to tell you guys or kind of reveal what the story agent or the story plot line is going to be, but within the story, I just want to kind of talk about the pathway to determination and what determination can lead towards as well. And so the idea being that, you know, generally speaking, there's an emotional stimulus, someone becomes inspired, right? And then through inspiration, you might take an actionable motivation, right? And so that motivation is kind of the the walk the walk. You talk the talk, you have the idea, and then you walk the walk, right? And then some adversity strikes, and when adversity strikes, you need to have determination, and you need to have accountability. And through that, if you have the right amount of accountability, it becomes discipline. And then if you have that discipline, generally speaking, once through repetitions, that becomes habits. And so I'm going to kind of talk about the pathways and how being determined can then lead to just daily habits, and how the idea that, like I kind of talked about earlier, the difficult now can be a perceived easier later on.
Right.
And that's kind of what my whole talk is going to be about. But I'm going to use a person and some people in my life to kind of drive that framework and be able to share that pathway through somebody's vantage point.
Good stuff. Victoria, how about yourself?
Yeah. So kind of similar approach. So obviously my background is in psychology and then sports psychology. My dissertation was a qualitative research project. So I've always been really drawn to like the human experience and stories about the human experience. And I think we have so much to learn from stories of the human experience. And so my talk also kind of is rooted in this notion of storytelling and storytelling of the human experience. I'm really going to talk about actually my own experiences. So I'm going to kind of be a little bit vulnerable and talk about my experiences as an athlete and really kind of touch on moments where I lost determination. And then I'm going to kind of reflect on what do I wish I would have done in those situations, or what could I have done in those situations to help me try and sustain that determination, to help me try and sustain that motivation. And it's my hope that everyone will resonate with that story. Like, I think we've all had moments where we've been pursuing something and it maybe started to feel like a job. It started to feel monotonous. It didn't feel like something we were passionate about anymore. And, you know, it's really easy to sustain determination and motivation when we love what we're doing.
Right.
It's a little bit harder to do those things when it becomes something that feels like a job. And so I'm just going to kind of like unpack that story and then have like a reflection piece of here are some tangible things that, reflecting back, I could have done to help me sustain that motivation and that determination in moments where it was really hard to. So that's kind of storytelling aspect with a little bit of reflection, which is interesting because when we first got asked to do this, I immediately went to like the research, right? Like the academic side of me was like, what does the research say about all
Right.
of this stuff? And like, what are leading people in the field saying about determination? And how can I share this research with all these other people and make it like really tangible research? And then I started to do some reflection, and similar to Henry, kind of thought about like what TED Talks have really resonated with me. And it was always ones that told a story and then connected that story to research and connected that story to the topic. And I think we as human beings are really drawn to storytelling. I mean, it's been a part of our culture for as long as our culture has been a thing, right? Like we have shared experiences through storytelling. And so I just think that we have like a natural inclination to storytelling. And if we can connect that back to research and connect that back to theoretical concepts, I think that's incredible if we can kind of bridge that gap. Because for me, TED Talks are really about making the information accessible, right? It's
Right.
about going up there and making that information accessible to people.
Yeah.
And I love research, right? I love reading research. I love all of those things. But have you ever been reading a research article and it feels totally out of your reach? Like I have my PhD and sometimes I
All
read,
the
yeah,
time.
sometimes I read articles and I'm like, this, I have my PhD and this article makes no sense. Like how is this accessible to the general public? And it's not. And so for me, TED Talks are about like, how can I ground this in research, but still make it accessible?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to do is how can I ground this in sports psych research, but still make it really accessible to people? Because there's a ton of great research out there that no one sees because it's just not accessible, it's not readable, and so
Yeah.
it's tricky, you know. There's that gap a little bit, that research to like application gap.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of high level concepts, and so I liken it to mastery. You know, everybody that's going to be up there, yourselves included, are masters of the information that you guys are going to be talking about.
Mhm.
And one of the things about mastery, this is how you know that you're at mastery level of knowledge, is being able, because knowledge is not comprehension. So reading isn't comprehension.
Right.
A lot of people misunderstand that, but mastery is being able to take that information, these high level concepts, and break it down so you can disperse that information to everybody and make it relatable.
Yeah.
And that's where storytelling comes in. I'm like yourselves, I'm actually pulled and drawn in by a lot more of the storytelling aspect of the TEDx's or the TED Talks I've actually watched myself. And
Mhm.
if you look through culturally, even some of the more ancient cultures, storytelling was a big part of their culture. That's how they entertained themselves. So it would make sense, the reason why people are more pulled and drawn in, because there's a level of connection, level of emotional attachment when you're hearing a story firsthand versus something that's a disconnect, like research. You know, research is relevant, but research is oftentimes there's a disconnect because you're like, wait a minute, how does this even apply to what I'm trying to, I'm trying to teach, or how does this apply into my everyday life? And that's where people are amiss. That's where it loses a lot of people. So,
Yeah, honestly, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, it was from my master's advisor, and I was working through internships. And when you're new at an internship, so it was one of my very first internships, like out on my own. So I'm like doing this work all by myself. I have a supervisor that's checking in with me. You tend to rely a lot on like those theoretical concepts because that's what you're comfortable with, right? Like you just
mhm,
spent 7 years learning theoretical concepts and you feel like that's what you need to rely on. And I remember in one session that we had together, he looked at me and said, Victoria, you'll know that you know the information if you can explain it to an elementary school kid. That's how you
absolutely,
know
yeah,
the information.
Yeah.
Because if you can take all these theoretical concepts and make it tangible for someone that knows nothing about what you're talking about, then you know it really well. And so I think that goes to your point of like, how do we make that tangible, accessible? Like, we don't have
mhm,
to speak in these really grandiose scientific terms to make that information fun and exciting and accessible.
yeah. Well, I'm so excited to really hear on stage in real time you guys' story. And let me just say that you guys are a part of my story. When I started this thought process, and I've been answering this question a lot lately, is a lot of people have been asking me, like, where did you even come up with this idea of even throwing this event? Well, selfishly, I wanted to speak on somebody's platform, somebody else's platform, and TEDx or TED or what have you. And now that I'm an event planner and I understand why it's so hard to get on somebody else's platform. Typically, it's going to be they already have somebody in mind. There's already a speaker stream. There's the aspect of There's people who are already very seasoned, and if you're a no-name speaker, then sometimes you're going to get overlooked. It's just by luck. Sometimes maybe you might get a call back. I didn't know all that. So me and my own mind, I'm like, well, I'll just throw my own event. And so I applied. I got denied the first time around because my scope wasn't broad enough. So they said just reapply. And I reapplied. I broadened the scope a little bit. And even just thinking on that whole process, thinking about all the things I've gone through, and what you had to do is declare a theme. And I was like, what would the theme be? And it dawned on me. I was like, well, look at all that you had to go through to get here. The theme is determination. So I was like, yep, that's it. So I got the application license, and at that point I'm looking at this thing like, dude, you are way in over your head. Like, where do you go from here? And I didn't know how this was going to shape up. I didn't know how this was going to unfold. And what was very selfish at the moment then became more of service to others. And when it became that, it's funny because everything started to fall into place. Amanda, who's my co-event planner, I've been living next door to her since I lived here in SLO. We might have said more than 5 words to each other, but that was about it. But I knew, just living next door to her, that she was an event planner. And I'm sitting outside, and I say, "Hey, Amanda," because she walked by. I say, "Hey, Amanda, you're an event planner, aren't you?" And she's like, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Look, I have this TEDx deal that I'm trying to organize. Would you want to help me?" And she's like, "Prince, I'm all the way in." And from that point on, it's been taking a life on its own. And I started, asking people, hey, to speak on the platform, and one thing led to another. I'm getting calls, and it's been phenomenal. Actually, kind of, my mind is blown sometimes every day at how this is unfolding, how this is developing, and you guys are a part of that story.
We're really appreciative to be a part of it, man. And I think it's really cool. I agree wholeheartedly that when you start putting the others first, that it ends up working out for you just like it should. You know what I mean? The universe has a funny way of making that happen sometimes,
Yeah. Well, gosh, and what a perfect example of like exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like, how do you respond to failure, right? Like, you got rejected the first time, and it could have been easy for you to say, I just can't do this. This isn't for me. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be. And you reframed that, and you said, okay, like, these are the things they said I needed to do to get better. I'm going to do those things, and I'm going to apply again. And so I think just like a perfect testament of like, how can we use failure to be better, to get better, to learn, and to achieve the things that we want to achieve.
Hell yeah.
That's how I've always had that type of mindset, and my brain is wired that way. And one of the things that, if you know me, don't tell me no, because there's always a solution to the problem. So the worst thing you can do, or the best thing you can do, is tell me no, because I will come back to the table, and we're going to have a negotiation until we fix this.
That's what determined people do, man.
That's right. Exactly. Hey, so but listen, you guys, I don't want to hold up you guys any more time. We've gone almost an hour and 10 minutes.
It's exciting stuff.
Hey, you guys can talk. See, 18 minutes can fly by very fast.
Yes.
And then we just having a conversation. So, man, I know it's going to be exciting. I actually enjoy listening to you guys talk and getting to know you guys at a deeper level. I know you guys, professionally, but just, now even more as friends. I think this is going to be super awesome for all of us. Just be prepared. Your lives are going to change after this.
Hell yeah. No, I think so too. I think so too. I think going back to what we initially stated when we were talking about getting lucky, this is one of those lucky things, and I just think we're prepared and the opportunities arrived, and I think we're all going to make the most of it, man. We just really appreciate you kind of laying that out for us. So, Prince, thank you for having us on today, and thank you for kind of giving us the opportunity to
Absolutely.
share our knowledge and our passion and our mastery in front of a group, in front of a hopefully a pretty solid crowd over at the pack, and it's gonna be fun, man.
Yeah, it is gonna be fun. We're gonna get there.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Well, you guys have a great rest of your day while you
Thank
go to
you.
work.
Prince, man, appreciate you, brother. You have a good weekend.
All right. Okay, you too. All right.